It was a forgotten Grimm fairy tale the world chose to forget, whispered at the edges of memory and shadowed by its better-known kin. This is the story of a girl whose worth was weighed like salt and found more precious than gold, and of a hidden destiny that rose from a well in the mountains. High in a lonely forest-clad range lived a very old woman with her geese in a ramshackle hut. One morning she met a young count walking through the woods and spoke of her heavy load, coaxing him to carry it for her up the steep path. When at last they reached her home, she thanked him with an emerald box and warned him not to fall in love with her ugly daughter who tended her flock. The count went his way, the box heavy in his pack, until he reached a great town ruled by a king and queen. Curious, he presented the gift to the queen, who upon opening it collapsed as if dead. Guards seized the count and flung him into a dank dungeon. When at last the queen stirred, she wept bitterly and begged to speak with him. She told of her youngest daughter, a princess of rare beauty whose tears were pearls and jewels. Once the king had demanded each daughter declare her love for him. The eldest spoke of sugar and sweetness, the second of silks and jewels, but the youngest, struggling for words, said she loved him like salt. Fury burned in the king's heart at such a humble comparison. He cast her from the palace with nothing but a sack of salt, and she was never seen again. The pearl in the emerald box was exactly like those tears the princess shed, the queen said, and hope stirred in her heart. She and the king determined to seek the mysterious old woman who might know where their daughter had vanished. So they set out with the count, following vague roads that led ever deeper into the wild. Meanwhile, the old woman's ugly Goose Girl spent her days by the water's edge, tending the silent birds whose feathers gleamed like dim stars in dust. Each night she crept to a deep, shadowed well and bathed in its chilling waters. When the moon cast its light upon her face, she became a beautiful young woman, her hair gleaming like threads of dawn. But when the moon dipped behind a cloud, her beauty faded, and sorrow weighed her shoulders down like winter frost on boughs. 3 years had passed in this lonely cadence. The old woman grew restless, telling the girl that their time together was at an end, that the hut was no place for one of her true worth. She bade her wait in her room, confused and fearful, and slipped away into the woods, leaving the girl alone by the geese. One evening, as moonlight struck the forest tracks and silvered every leaf, the count lost his way and stumbled upon that very hut. Through the open door, he saw the girl beside the geese, her hair loosened and her face luminous beneath the lunar glow. In that moment, his breath caught. He saw not an ugly servant, but a spirit of deep sorrow and profound grace. He called to her, and startled, she turned. Their eyes met with the stillness of fate unfolding. Before the count could speak, a distant rustle announced the approach of the king and queen. They stood bewildered at the threshold of the hut, the cold night air clinging to their cloaks. The old woman reappeared from the trees, her crooked staff tapping on roots and stone. Her voice was grave as she chastised the royal pair for the injustice done to their daughter. With a wave of her hand, she bade the girls step forward. In that instant, the shackles of time and sorrow fell away, and the princess stood in her true form before her parents. The king and queen wept, their tears mingling with the dust of the forest floor as remorse and relief battled in their hearts. They reached for her hands and begged her forgiveness, the years of anguish weighing upon them like an iron yoke. The princess, whose tears had become pearls, looked upon them with the still waters of mercy in her gaze. The old woman stepped back into the gloom, and, as dawn's first breath brushed the sky, she faded like mist in sunshine. The humble hut transformed before their eyes into a grand castle, stone and spire rising from the earth as if by magic. The geese vanished, their shadows dispersing at the touch of light, and the mountains echoed with a promise reborn. In time, the count and the princess were wed within that castle's gleaming halls. Though sorrow had carved deep lines upon their souls, joy grew in the spaces left behind. They ruled with kindness, remembering the price of humility and the weight of salt in a world that so often prizes only gold. And in their reign, the memory of tears and mercy became a quiet testament to the cost of love.